Hi. Let's see if anybody's listening. Okay. So, as Bethany said, I am a primitive living wilderness survival instructor and a backcountry guide. And in conversations with people, when I mention my occupation, a lot of people start talking to me about flares and water filters and space blankets and MREs. I don't know anything about any of that stuff. I Googled survival women once to see what I was supposed to look like. There was a bunch of really foxy ladies in camo bikinis with big guns. That's not what I do. So this is really more what my job looks like. Meeting your needs, improvising with what Mother Nature gives you to meet your needs the same way that our ancestors did. Obviously that is a big subject, but in the next 15 minutes I'm going to give you the tip of that iceberg. So the scenario is this, okay? You got lost hiking, your car broke down in Death Valley, your plane crashed on a deserted island, society has collapsed, and your home's been overtaken by marauders, any of these things. The good news is, barring the collapse of society, search and rescue is going to find you within 72 hours. The bad news is, some people die in that amount of time. Who here feels like they could stay alive with nothing but the clothes on their backs in a wilderness environment?
How long?
Well, that's a lot of death. A lot of you are going to die. It's okay. I got you. We're going to help. So first and foremost, stay calm. Because when you're freaking out, the blood leaves your extremities, including your brain, and goes to your core. And that means you don't process sensory input very well, and you're not thinking very clearly. It's kind of what's happening to me right now. Your heart rate rises, which means that you're now expending caloric and hydration reserves that you have inside of your body that are now not easily replenished. So get safe, obviously. Stay where you are if this is a situation where you got lost. Get somewhere safe, away from immediate dangers. For instance, if you are in a valley or low point and it's raining, you want to get high. If there's lightning and you're on a mesa, you want to get low or take cover. If you see mountain lion or bear scat and kills everywhere, probably pick another camp. And then in everything that you do, you want to focus on conservation of energy. Again, you've got now very limited calories, both inside of you and outside of you, and very limited hydration, both inside of you and outside of you, potentially. So you want to be strategically lazy in a survival situation. So our first priority with survival is always shelter. It doesn't matter what environment you're in. And in survival terms, shelter means thermoregulation. So keeping your core body temperature in a safe range, not too hot, not too cold. You have about 3 hours before you could potentially die from extreme heat or extreme cold. As a matter of fact, 80% of search and rescue deaths are a result of exposure. Survival in heat, pretty self-explanatory. You can lower your body temperature by getting in the shade, getting into water, drinking water, wetting your clothing. A lot of people think you want to get down to your tank top and your shorts, but think about like the Bedouins and other African and Arabic tribes who have been living in the heat for thousands of years. What do? They make shade out of their clothing with breathable and loose fabrics to get the sun off of their skin. And also, you want to prioritize your activities so that you're doing the more strenuous things in the cooler hours of the day. For cold weather survival, they say cotton kills. You might have heard that phrase before. Outdoorsy people hear that. What that means is if you're wearing cotton, you're actually going to be colder if that's wet than if you were naked. Wool, on the other hand, will keep you warm even when it's wet. Let's see, what else about that? The name of the game really in cold weather survival is insulation. My favorite way of creating insulation is a debris hut. So what you're doing basically is creating a microclimate around your body that you can heat up without using a whole lot of calories. And so basically like your down jacket or your sleeping bag. And you can improvise that with natural materials. This is basically just a skeleton or a frame that you make with sticks, and then you pack around it, and this is actually done improperly because they don't have a mattress on the ground, which is the most important part. But you pack around whatever natural materials around you, loose materials. So pine duff, fallen leaves, dry grass, preferably dead and dry stuff, like this fella here. Now, if you don't have the time or the materials to make a proper debris hut, the most important thing is to insulate yourself from the ground. Get yourself off of the ground in some kind of fashion, even if it's uncomfortable stuff under you, because the ground takes your heat from your body significantly faster than does the air. So that's the most important thing. Okay, so water is your next survival priority after shelter. You can die of dehydration in 3 days, give or take. Obviously, there are variables. What's important to know about water is how to find it, obviously. So you want to get to high ground in as much as you can without expending too much energy, and that you're able to find your way back. And you want to look at the topography or the shape of the land. You want to look for low points and valleys because water, like everything, follows gravity. So if you find a place that looks like water's already carved through it and then you go down, you're likely to find water. Also pay attention to vegetation because where there's more robust and diverse plant life, that's also indicative of water. Now, if you follow those rules and you go to where there should be water and you don't see anything, especially if there's like little plants or little bugs, and particularly if there's mud on the ground, often you can dig down into the water table and find subsurface water. Most folks know that you want moving water over still water, particularly after about 100 feet of white water. There's a significantly lower pathogen count, and probably due to aeration. And then a really cool survival hack to get water that doesn't even need to be treated, that's already cleaned, is to go out at the dew point, which is the coldest hour of the 24-hour cycle, usually between 4 and 5 a.m. You're not sleeping anyways because you're freezing, so you might as well be active. And take your t-shirt or a bandana or something and collect the water that's condensed on the leaves and the grass, bring it into a container, and you can actually get enough water to survive that way. And then in terms of cleaning water, now in survival terms when we say clean water, we don't mean no floaties. We don't mean that it doesn't taste grody or even have a smell. What we mean is that it's not going to make you sick, more dehydrated, or dead. It's going to eliminate any harmful pathogens, viruses, or bacteria, usually from human or animal death or fecal matter. That's fun. So, in the scenario that we're approaching here, we have no modern gear. We've got just the clothes on our backs. The only guaranteed way to purify water in a primitive situation is to boil it. Now, how are we going to do that without a pot? My favorite method is creating what's called a coal-burned bowl. It's just what it sounds like. You get a sturdy piece of wood and you put some coals from the fire on there and you blow it, and then you let it burn through for a little while. You move it to the side, scrape the char, and then repeat that process until you've created the cavity or the container that you want. Once you have the bowl, you put your water in there, and then you heat rocks in the fire. Heat them until they're red hot. And then you can use 2 sticks as a couple of chopsticks, or you can bend a bendy one and use it as tongs and transfer those hot rocks into the water, and the water will boil. And at that point, the water is safe to drink. Some helpful tips. There have been people who were found dead of dehydration next to a water source that was questionable. If you can only find gross water and you don't have a way to treat it, drink that water because dehydration will kill you faster than Giardia or any other waterborne pathogens which have an incubation period that is longer than the amount of time it will take you to get to modern medicine. So drink water. Secondly, don't conserve your water. Drink to your thirst. There have also been people who found dead with water in their canteens because it gives them this sense of security. But what doesn't work about that is that once you get to a certain degree of dehydration, you're not keeping the water down anyway. You're puking it up. So drink to thirst. It's better in you than on you. And thirdly, I don't care what Bear Grylls told you, do not drink your pee. It will only dehydrate you faster because of the salt content, and it's gross. Don't do it. So fire is obviously extremely significant to survival and has been through the history of the world. It provides thermoregulation, it gives us light, it cooks our food, it cleans our water, it wards off predators, it can be used for signaling and communication, and we can use it to make tools. It's what separates us from the animals. This is the point where I was going to do what's called busting a coal, which is friction fire, but you can't have fire in a church building. So just imagine me doing it, it's really hot. Literally. Has anyone ever attempted friction fire? Has anyone ever succeeded at friction fire? What? That's right. Cool. I saw the trail walkers all raising their hands. I saw the trail walkers all raising their hands. That's cool. There have been over 30 different methods of friction fire that have been discovered by archaeologists. The ones that are most common that people usually see is the bow drill. Have you seen that thing where you got the bow and you're doing this number? And then the hand drill like this. Or if you saw Castaway, he was doing the plow. The bow drill is what I recommend learning on. It's definitely the easiest, though it took me 6 hours to get my first coal. But fire obviously extremely Okay, so food is your first obsession, but your last priority. You got 30 days before you die of starvation. You're only going to feel like you're dying. You're not actually dying. 5 edible plants that are easily recognizable to most people and found in most places. Grass, there's hundreds of different species of grass, and 99% of them are edible. Think about the staples of our diet: oats, barley, wheat, rye, rice, corn. These are all grasses. The parts of grass that are edible is the rhizome, which is that white part above the root, and then the seeds. Dandelions, the entire plant is edible, though I wouldn't recommend eating the puffball. Coniferous trees, any tree with a pine cone has 3 edible parts. Tender new growth that is bright green you can eat, and the cambium bark, which is inside of the rough bark. It's this white layer of bark that's nutrient rich. And then obviously, as well the pine nuts, which have fats, proteins, and carbohydrates, which are hard to get in a survival situation, and they're tasty. Cattail is called the survival supermarket because at any given time of year, part of that plant is edible, from the seeds to the pollen, to the root, to the rhizome, to the lower leaves, etc. Acorns. Acorns have been a staple for many cultures, and but in order to be edible and palatable to humans, you need to leach it to remove the tannins, but it also has proteins, fats, and carbohydrates, making it a really great staple. Otherwise, guys, bugs are food. Your ancestors probably ate them. There's still people who do. Bugs you can eat: ants, termites, worms, grubs. You can cut the stinger off the scorpion and eat it. I recommend cooking bugs in some kind of fashion because sometimes they have parasites, and avoid bugs that have bright colors or exotic. Try to stick with the bugs you know. Okay, so this one I just told you is called the sacred order of survival. This is your survival priorities. And when I'm teaching kids, I teach it like this: shelter, water, fire, food. That's the sacred order, dude. It really helps. And it's based on the rule of 3s. You've got 3 hours and extreme temperatures before you die, 3 days without water, and then fire's in the middle because it helps with everything else, and then you've got 30 days without food. So these are the skills that we've discussed are applying to a short-term survival situation, but they also apply to a long-term primitive living or wilderness living situation, as well as things like basketry, pottery, celestial navigation, medicinal plants, stone, bone, wood, tools, animal processing for fiber and food and tools, tracking, trapping, hunting, etc. These are things that at one point everyone on the planet knew how to do, and now less than 1% of people practice these skills. I think that's tragic. No matter who you are, if you go back far enough, your people were doing this. It's not cultural appropriation. Do it. It's okay. So, and then you might be saying now at this point, yeah, my ancestors needed to do that stuff because they didn't have an iPhone. Why does it matter to me? Well, a few things. It's true that we do have these systems that we're heavily dependent upon, and they've always been there throughout our whole lives, but the fact is they are not infallible and they're not promised. My motivation to do this stuff is not fear-based, but the church has recommended that we be prepared and self-sufficient, which is really smart. But within that, we generally focus on stockpiling food and gear. Stuff is great, but stuff can get lost, broken, stolen, used up. Skills don't. And so I suggest we add skills to our preparedness and our self-sufficiency. And then my main motivation for doing this work is I really believe that this is our natural habitat. Being in the natural world makes us healthier and more holistically well people. That's been what I've discovered. What happens when you take an animal out of its natural habitat and put it into a zoo? It becomes neurotic. It develops disorders and syndromes. A big cat in a concrete box forgets how to be a cat. And I suggest that humans in concrete boxes forget how to human. We've got, and I don't want to oversimplify, but we have so many disorders in our life, and there are many factors, but one of them I suggest is nature deficiency. It's certainly been the case for me. It's totally redefined my path, as Bethany said, and I suggest that everybody get outside. This is what I've just presented to you is actually a 6-hour class. Obviously, we've just barely scraped the surface. What I want you to do is, if there's something in this presentation that piqued your interest, Google that, YouTube it, go in your backyard, do it, go on a backpacking trip, get immersed in the backcountry, trust Mother Nature, she's got you. Everything you need is provided in the natural world. We get real confused in all this artificial. I encourage you all to be more intimately involved with and to interact more with the stones and the stars and the streams and the animals and what I call the real world. Thank you so much.